Welcome to the Humane Resources interview series. I'm Jose, your host for this episode, also a co-founder of Teamspective. And our today's guest is Rachel Wright, who has had a really interesting career so far, plenty of valuable experiences to share with us related to the HR topics. So really looking forward to this. Yeah, great to have you join this interview, Rachel.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me, Ilsa.
Yeah.
Great to be here.
And you've been working well in various places. So in HR, doing communication at major companies like Zalando.
Mhm.
Before, you're also an entrepreneur, which is always exciting and provides a lot of nice experiences. But yeah, what have you been up to lately?
Yeah, so I guess like as you mentioned, I would say like my career has its roots in PR and HR, you could say. So learning communications, doing work with the European Commission before going over to Zalando, which is where I first kind of got in contact with a lot of like the HR topics that I work with today.
Mm,
And originally, it was really all around the topic of performance management and feedback. So I'm really excited to talk about this topic with you this morning in Berlin. And yeah, after a bit at Zalando, working as an HR communication specialist, so helping out all of the different teams and looking to see, how can we communicate topics like performance management and feedback, but also learning and development, mentorship, even like compensation
mm,
to a workforce of 6,000 and really take care that like the employee experience feels connected and supported, I would say. So after a couple years of doing this, I decided to take the jump and start my own company, which is Sell Ready. And I think here too, it's a premium picnic service operating in Berlin. I work with a lot of companies and help them create really nice team events in person, which has been nice, I think, coming off the heels of COVID.
mm,
Uh, and then, later in 2021, I joined the team over at Zen Growth. So it's a completely remote growth marketing agency, and there helped them build up the HR function before being asked to step in as interim CEO a bit later on in the year, which was a really exciting opportunity. This just ended actually quite recently, and right now I'm basically working with different startups and helping them also build up really strong cultures and HR functions as an independent consultant. So that's kind of where it's at.
yeah. Thanks for sharing. That's really a broad range of experience. So yeah, but you mentioned like back in Zalando already, you were part of like designing some of these feedback and performance processes, and now you consult growth companies on HR as well. So could you share like what kind of common challenges and maybe some learnings related to those you have seen across these?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think like when it comes to performance management, of course, there are quite a few challenges out there. I would say that two main ones come to mind. And I would say like the first challenge I see is connected to values and behaviors. And the second challenge is really around like collecting quality feedback. Maybe we can dive into the first one first.
Sure.
So yeah, of course, like a performance management framework is there to take a look and see like where is the performance bar set within a company, and also provide feedback to the team members that work there. So
Mm,
I think looking at this for this kind of framework, of course, like you want to take stock of values, like to which extent, are your people living the values that you think should be directing the organization? And I think as well, also, results, how on the individual level, how is everyone really driving their own results that add to the entire company's success? I think when it comes to the values piece of this, if a company hasn't taken the time to get specific on which behaviors, they see as being in line with like living the values, I think it becomes very difficult then when you ask for feedback for colleagues to assess, is this person living this value? And so this is like where I think the recommendation from my side would be, especially for teams that are just starting out with their values, is to add this component into the conversations that you're having with your team. So, after you do define, like, these are our values, and maybe this is even how we describe this value, what does it mean to live that value? And I think, even asking this question to your team, you'll get a sense for, the different interpretations, I think, maybe just like for communication, what does it mean to have transparent communication? This can mean something different, depending on where you sit. And so coming down to like a very, to a shared understanding of what the behavior is, so that later on it's easier to assess and give feedback.
That makes perfect sense. And would kind of like ideal values be kind of actions or action oriented? That our value is that we behave in this way.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's up to the team for how specific you want to get. I think coming to Zen Growth, for example, we paired these up, like our values, to our company policy. So we were quite a small team, so we had 10 policy points, and these all fit under the values. So, for example, like one value was like we level up. This was all about having a growth mindset and really looking to learn. And the policy point that fit under that was, we expect that you're going to really give your, give your all to like the projects that you have, and really do your best to make sure that our clients are happy. And of course, we had already fit questions like this into the recruiting process. So by the time we're having the onboarding and going through these policy points, it's already quite clear to us that we're on the same page. So I think this is also important. And I think the second challenge that I see is around collecting quality feedback. And I'm sure that this is also something you probably have engaged with a lot over at Teamspective. But I think if you aren't intentional, or if you don't do any training around giving feedback, chances are the quality that you get is not going to be that great. And really, like, especially like the qualitative feedback, this is really, I think, like the raw material of your performance management framework, right? So if all you have to go off of is quantitative scores, and you don't have any rich examples of, situations, behaviors, impact, it's going to be really difficult for leads, especially, to think, to really discern, like, where is the performance bar? Is this person meeting it? What is the impact that they're generating? So I think even before you go into a performance management framework cycle, like, you want to start having trainings like with your team to bring them up to speed. Why is feedback valuable? What does quality feedback look like? And also to start, connecting to this idea as feedback as a gift, right? So like, feedback is something you take the time to provide your colleague, because hopefully, you're genuinely invested in seeing other people in your team grow. And I think that this is basically, for me, why I think it's really worth it to spend the time to, give quality feedback, because it's for someone else.
Yeah, and that makes perfect sense. So in a way, could I say that what your kind of meaning here is like that it requires time. It has to be communicated that it's important and people need to put in the time, but at the same time you can try to kind of reduce the burden and the time required by giving this like training, or maybe even like guidance while they are giving the feedback, depending on the tools.
Totally. Yeah. So I think, like, definitely have the training and maybe do some role plays. But then, like, within the tool, having these tags that remind people, remember what quality feedback is, remember to describe the situation, describe the behavior, describe the impact. Because the person that's reading it on the other end, like the lead wasn't there, for example. So like, they need to understand the context. And also for the person receiving it, think about if you're receiving feedback a bit later, you might have a different perspective. And so really having a rich example helps you see the situation and helps you see your actions from someone else's eyes.
Yeah, great. And I love that you're mentioning the SBI, situation behavior impact model. We at like Teamspective have like used that a lot in building our guidance. I think the second favorite has always been the nonviolent communication,
Yeah.
which is great. It usually is not concrete enough. So kind of
Mm.
merging those two has been a good way forward as well.
Yeah, and I like it as well because I think sometimes, especially in the beginning, giving feedback can feel uncomfortable,
Mm,
especially if it's constructive feedback. And having this kind of model gives you something, gives you like a framework, right? So like you can be objective and say like, what was the situation? You know, well, we had this meeting last week, you know, what was the behavior that I saw? Like, well, maybe, you know, you weren't prepared for the meeting, you know, and what was the impact? Well, we couldn't come to a decision. So like, we're going to have another meeting, you
mm,
know, like
yeah.
this feels very objective and helps someone else see like the impact of their behavior.
Mm, yeah. And then I think a related, really common struggle companies have with these topics is that when you create a process, it works when the process is active. But then what happens in between those points might be dropped. Like you said, feedback is a gift. So is it a gift you give before the Christmas holiday, or is it a gift you give every month throughout the year? So do you have any kind of ideas or learnings on this, how to keep people active kind of all the time? Because feedback should be given and discussed all the time.
Yeah, yeah, I really agree. It's also like, I mean, it's a struggle that I've seen. Like, we also encountered like at Zalando, for example, and also other companies.
Mm,
I think the first step is to try and get away, especially like as a lead and within HR, just like the way that you're communicating, you know, feedback. Try to decouple it from like your performance management framework. So like, of course, you're going to be using it for performance, but I think, you know, try to connect it more to development, you know, helping your team develop, getting, you know, helping yourself develop by requesting feedback. So I think this is the first thing. And I think the second thing is that, you know, giving feedback is a habit and habits need to be intentionally, yeah, intentionally cultivated. And in the beginning, like any habit, you know, it's difficult and it takes a bit of work, but if you're consistent, then it gets easier. So I think like within an organization, it's basically the same thing, like cultivating a culture of feedback, a feedback culture is really cultivating a feedback habit. And
mm,
I think for me personally, one framework I suppose that I go back to was really what I learned in Charles Duhigg's book, Power of Habit, and it's his habit loop. So if you've read it before, you know it starts with a cue, which could be, you know, some sort of trigger, and then that's the routine, and this is the part that we usually think of the habit. It's like the action, and then
mm,
it ends with a reward. And so I think like the way that we can do this, especially like within HR, but also like as leads, is like to think about how you can support each step of this feedback loop so that you're building this habit. So, for example, starting with the cue or the trigger, I think here to think about maybe how you can establish a company ritual of giving one another feedback. So, like, you know, maybe like a feedback Friday, for example.
mm,
um, and like thinking about how you can strengthen this by using a reminder. So I know like some reminders that I've used in the past are like Google Calendar invites. So like sending these out basically to like the entire organization so that you have like a little invitation in your calendar that says like, you know, 30 minutes for giving feedback. So you kind of see it and it triggers like, okay, like today I need to give feedback or today I should give feedback.
mm,
And then I think also like as a lead, role modeling. So like, you know, giving people feedback on Fridays, like if this is the habit that you're trying to strengthen, and following up with your team, you know, so like you can also be the cue that you want to trigger the behavior. So just like asking people like, hey, have you given feedback today? From there, like to the routine, thinking about how you can make it easy, removing the friction to like do the action. So
mm,
here I think that like Teamspective is actually a really great tool for that since it connects to Slack. And I think also just like makes it easy to provide feedback because it's quite short and you know you can kind of decide like which dimensions you want to give feedback on.
mm,
So you know as a lead, just like thinking about like which format is this going to be in and how am I going to make it easy. And then lastly, thinking about a reward. And I think in the early stages of habit formation, like the reward is really key. Think about the other habits that you've created in your life. Of course, like the running one is the one that's used in examples a lot. Like, are you trying to go to the gym? Are you trying to go running? Like, it's hard. No one wants to do it in the beginning, but thinking about like the good feeling that you have afterwards is usually its own reward. But maybe in the beginning, you need to give yourself an extra reward, whatever that is for you. And here, I think the same applies. So you could think about a reward, for example, as recognition. So like as a lead, really calling out like, hey, I saw you've been giving a lot of feedback lately in the tool. I just wanted to tell you it's having a really great impact in the team. Like I've seen, it's really helping people learn and grow. So I just wanted to say thanks. Like that feels really great. I think you can also maybe do like a team level incentive, something like, hey, together as a team, we want to make sure that everyone gets one piece of feedback this week. So let's all do it. And if we do this as a team, then I don't know, maybe we have pizza or, there are
Mm.
drinks. You could also like have chocolate if you have like a in-person setup, or maybe even give tokens, like if you're in a remote setup that can be redeemed for something later on. Like I think you can get super creative with the rewards, but I think really having it in place will help you get that habit going.
Mm. Yeah. Um, yeah, those are really great kind of simple steps. Not easy to execute, I'd say, but simple steps
Yeah.
to keep in mind. We have seen at the Inspective, like related to the queues, that whenever we started kind of sending these activation messages via Slack to people, it just increased the amount of feedback, I think like 6 times. So
Yes.
it's just about getting that small piece of attention from people and then getting to that, like you said, make it easy and then reward with something, which I think I read, it wasn't this book, but in some other book, that the best rewards are also variable.
Yeah.
So it's not the same reward
Mm.
all the time, but yeah, that's the next
Yeah.
step.
Switch it up, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think like with the queue, I mean, from a communications perspective, like remembering that we're all inundated with triggers basically, right? Like how many notifications are you getting a day? So trying to get creative there, like maybe having your tech queue, but like following it up with like the lead queue, I think could be a good one. Like having someone like Slack message you like, hey, have you done this? Or maybe even setting up like something like accountability partners in the beginning could be good.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's I don't think anyone can highlight the role of the leader enough. So,
Yeah,
well, in the end, if people need to choose what the leader expects people to do, will kind of communicate what really is important then in that
totally.
situation. Yeah, great. I still want to ask you another tricky one related to the performance management and the feedback, because I think the one more common challenge that we at least see is that feedback gets mixed up with performance evaluations.
Mm,
Then people start to think like, well, should I say this or what should I say? And then you kind of start getting this mainly positive, quite vague feedback, right? Because people know that it's tied to the evaluations. So any any thoughts on that? How to kind of set up for success with these two concepts?
yeah, I guess like the question as to like whether I don't know people are going to try and game the system, so to speak. Yeah, Um, it's a fair point, and I think as well, like when we look at surveys in general, especially ones that ask people to evaluate others, the general tendency is to evaluate others quite highly, I would say, like to stick to the, I don't know, upper edges of the survey, and really saying like, oh, this person's great, it's just a lot easier, I suppose. Takes less thought than to say like, okay, maybe this person is weaker here but stronger there. I think that there are a couple ways that you can go about this. So of course, like one is just like on the culture side, really connecting feedback to development and also showing how, constructive feedback really helps people grow.
Mm,
And it's better, I think, to hear the constructive feedback and give that person the opportunity to grow rather than to just give them very positive feedback, even though it doesn't feel honest, to your experience. Maybe even to frame it in that way that like, hey, when when you don't give constructive feedback, even though you have it to give, like you're kind of robbing this person of the opportunity to grow and change. So
Yeah,
that's one.
that's a good
um,
way to put it. Yeah.
yeah. And I think like within the tool, there are definitely ways that you can kind of like embed like nudges, I would say. So I think like a lot has been done up until now, like looking at behavioral psychology. And I think like one thing that we did look at, for example, like at Zalando was like sort of like priming people to think um, of like the person that they were evaluating having strengths and weaknesses. So just like by asking a question, you know, in the very beginning of like the feedback survey, you know, can you pick 3 development areas for this person? Okay, now can you pick 3 strengths? Just like from a list of like different skills. Um, and I think even there, like I don't even think like these 2 questions didn't really have, I don't remember, but I don't want to misspeak, but I would say like the really the point for these 2 questions was just to get people thinking like in terms of everyone has strengths and everyone has development areas.
Mm.
So I think that this is one way you can do it too. Yeah, and I think that would be it. Leadership, I think, also plays a role as well. So having a lead there that's really talking to the team and explaining like the value of the performance management framework. Also taking a look, I would say, like top down to make sure that the people that are evaluating one another have been working together. Because of course, like you need to have exposure to a person in order to give quality feedback. So
Yeah.
having a sense check.
All right. Excellent. Hey, thank you for sharing. We'll run out of time soon, so I'll try to sum up some of these points, but because I think they tie in together really nicely. But like if someone's looking to create a culture that where you have like active feedback discussions and it supports the professional development of the employees. So I think first you talked about kind of setting these concrete expectations
Mhm.
related to the values and other processes and enforce that with the leadership. And then when that is in place, train the people on what good feedback looks like, give
Yeah,
them tools that kind of helps them execute it. Uh, After that, step 3, try to find ways to create that routine through
yeah,
like these tools that remind people or some events that nudge them get the right things done and give recognition to those who are actually active then. And then
totally.
the last step was kind of to enforce that the feedback is for development, for growth. It's a gift, like you said, and try to kind of keep the feedback and the evaluations balanced. So it's not just criticism or just praise, but like so you get the both sides of it in a concrete way.
Yeah, totally. And I think just like lastly, like I do believe it is a gift, but I think in order for it to be a gift, the person receiving it needs to be ready to receive it. So also like practicing empathy when it comes to feedback, you know, asking for permission, like, are you ready for feedback? I noticed a couple of things. Do you mind if I give you some feedback? And being okay if that person says no, you know, sometimes, you know, if someone's not ready to hear it, then, you know, it's not maybe not worth it on your end to put in the effort. But yeah, I think it's I don't know, personally, I think it's helped me a lot. So I think it's always worth it.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Hey, thank you very much, Rachel. This has been super insightful. I think really lots taken from just 20 minutes discussion. So yeah, thank you for sharing all of this and participating in this interview.
Yeah, thank you so much for the ask. It was a pleasure to get to talk about this topic together with you. It was a